Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to episode 23 of the ESG show. Today we are talking about ethical consumerism. So what's that? Is it really a thing? Is really such a thing as ethical consumerism? One of our guests this morning doesn't think there is. Are consumers prepared to pay extra for ethical products? Do ethical products need to cost extra? We will be talking about waste later in this show, and maybe if we wasted less, we could simultaneously consume more ethically and save money. Speaking personally, I only ever buy dolphin-friendly tuna and free-range eggs. I guess I pay a bit extra. But there are limits, and the economy is pretty awful right now. Most of us are feeling the squeeze. In the UK, there is an extremely popular budget clothes shop. But other products they sell produce ethically. Looking at the price of their clothes, I'm not sure it's possible. Some brands say their products are ethical, but are they really? And when consumers find out that ethical claims don't stand up to scrutiny, they become cynical and maybe harder to sell to, even when ethical claims are legitimate. I often hear it said that these issues are more popular with Generation Z, but are they really? The budget clothes shop I told you about just now is very popular with Generation Z. Maybe we're all guilty of greenwashing. We say we only want ethical products, but do we really practice what we preach? Let me just leave you, before I move on and introduce the guests, to a band that was one of my favourite bands when I was a kid, a band called Supertramp. And they once sung, "Now we are planning the crime of the century." But now they are planning the crime of the century. But who are these men of lust, greed and glory? Let's rip off their masks and let's see. Oh no, that's not right. What's the story? For there's you and there's me. So anyway, I like that quote. It's one of my favourite quotes from rock. Maybe it's my favourite quote from rock. Before we move on, I want to tell you about a survey that we did. We recently asked people, do you thoroughly check the supply chain of a product service you're buying to ensure it is ethical? And the majority, 57%, said they do not thoroughly check the supply chain of a product service they're buying. And a mere 43% said they do. We had some interesting comments. Isn't CSR supposed to be doing that? Ethical business operations minimize impacts on society and environment. Why coming up with ESG? It's all about financial risk, not environmental and social risk. That was Mark V that said that. And then Lokash said it's not just about dressing in the finest ethical attire, but rather embracing a profound change. And I think that kind of, Lokash, I think that kind of backs up what I was saying just now about maybe we're all guilty a little bit of greenwashing. Something a little bit more profound is required, I think, for us to truly consume ethically. Anyway, that's enough from me. Let's meet today's guests. And today on the show, we have Michael Rudder. Michael, is it Radar or Rudder?
Rudder.
Okay. So Michael is an experienced business professional, equipped with 30 plus years of rich business experience. He started his business career as a steel factory worker in 1990. Back in 2013, he invented and developed the systemic waste prevention methodology called industrial upcycling. He started to implement it in the real business and industrial environment of the Czech Republic, which is, I think, where you are right now, Michael, in the Czech Republic.
Yes, I am.
2 years later, industrial upcycling becomes the groundstone of Industry 5.0, which was launched on December the 1st, 2015. In 2020, Industry 5.9 was named the world's leading industrial trend. So, Michael, I've got a couple of questions for you. What is Industry 5.0, for one thing?
So, to very short, it's the first industrial evolution ever led by man, by human, and it's built on the principles of systematic waste prevention. And because every industry and everyone in the world is wasting, so waste prevention can be applied anywhere in the world, and it's very, very effective and efficient.
Okay, thank you. And Michael, you also said, I believe, that you don't actually think there is such a thing as ethical consumerism. What do you mean by that?
Generally, I have realized that if there are two words names like Green Deal, ethical consumerism, and so on, then the first word serves as a marketing term, as a promotion, something good, green, or ethical. But the reality is the second word. So deal means trade. So there is nothing about green. Consumerism will remain consumerism if we do not change our behavior. And that's important. So the change is not about the terms, the change is about our own behavior.
Okay, thank you for that, Michael. Nice to be greeted from one of our guests in Ireland today, saying it's very rainy in Ireland. Well, I have to tell you, it's very rainy here as well. Also on the show today, we have Isabella Wang. Hello, Isabella. How are you today?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Michael. Good. How are you doing?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And where are you today?
I'm currently in Beijing.
Okay, thank you. Well, great. So I'm in the UK. Michael's in Czech Republic. You're in Beijing. We seem to be covering a big chunk of the globe today. So Isabella is an impact entrepreneur with a deep passion for creating a positive impact in today's fast-paced digital landscape. She is the founder of Digital Thinker, a purpose-driven startup on a mission to elevate humanity through impact innovation centered on responsible AI, digital well-being, sustainability, and co-creation economy. As a recognized thought leader in social innovation, sustainable development, and future studies, Isabella's mission is to humanize the world by leveraging technology and innovation for the greater good. Her best-selling book, The Digital Mind of Tomorrow, offers a thought-provoking exploration of the intersection of technology and society. Isabella contributes numerous articles on digital innovation, ethical technology, impact investing, conscious capitalism, and related topics. Her insights have made her a featured speaker at leading international conferences where she shared her ideas on emerging technologies and their potential impact on society and business. So, Isabella, tell me a little bit about your book.
Thank you, Michael, for the intro, and happy to be here again with everyone here. So the book is about technology and society. I think the way we think and behave right now, it's far from catching up with today's technology, godlike super technology, right? And we don't have the system to deal with things like attention economy, deepfake, skyrocketing mental issues, information overload, cheap dopamine that kills our creativity and impact our future generations. And that's why I wrote this book. And basically, I'm challenging our social structure and to encourage each one of us to rethink how do we approach technology today as a human being, and also to confront consequences and dilemmas that we're facing because of technology development, and to find new ways to adapt and to thrive.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Isabella. And I agree with you about all those things that you talked about. Technologies is changing super fast, and I'm not sure that we are equipped with the tools. I mean, human beings are equipped with the tools to really comprehend what's going on. But anyhow, look forward to seeing you again in a few minutes. Also on the show today is Ellen Williams. Ellen is a returning guest. She's been on the show before. Hello, Ellen.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And where are you today?
I'm coming to you from New York City.
So we've got the globe covered then. New York, Beijing, UK, and Czech Republic. I think we've done pretty well there. So Ellen Williams is the director of advisory and ESG services at Orion Global Solutions, a summit level Salesforce implementation partner. She has over 25 years of experience as a technologist and business consultant. In addition to her background in technology, Ellen has added sustainability to her focus and is the program manager for all of Orion's customer implementations as Salesforce Net Zero Cloud, carbon accounting, and ESG management. Ellen is also an integrated reporting practitioner and positive change ambassador. She has worked with thousands of small businesses, helping them achieve alignment of their business processes and technology platforms, including sales, marketing, and ESG. She's also a professional writer, appearing in many publications, including Technology, Grain, Crane's New York, and NY Business, and Forbes, and a public speaker on podcasts including Sustainable Minds, Shark, Bite Biz, Vodcast, and Actionable ESG. She also talks at events such as NYC Social Media Week, NYPO. So, Ellen, tell me a little bit about Orion Global Solutions.
Certainly, thank you. Orion Global Solutions, we are a Salesforce implementation partner. So you buy Salesforce and you hire a partner to help you get it up and running and configured so it meets the needs of your business. And Salesforce has a handful of different platforms, probably best known for their customer relationship management, CRM, but they do have a product called Net Zero Cloud, which is a full ESG solution. And that's where my focus is at Orion.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ellen. Now we're all going to get together. We're going to talk about some recent editorial stories. But before we do that, we've had a question has popped up already from Christopher Bullock. Consumer behaviour, if it was formed as a sector, is the biggest contributor to climate impact and loss of biodiversity. Change starts at home. Any thoughts about that? Comment from any of you? Michael.
Mark.
If I can, Christopher, I don't believe that. You know, I am working since 1919 in factories and industries. There is intentionally not speaking about industrial impact, but the fact is that much bigger impact has the industries themselves. We are blamed as a consumers, but generally in one factory, there is more waste produced, if I take the waste, than in a city in a year, and they do it in one day. So this is why I do not believe this statement.
Okay. Isabella, Ellen, have you got anything to add to that?
I actually agree with it.
You do agree with it? So we've got a disagreement between our panelists this morning.
I think it starts at home. I think if we rely on industry, it's not going to happen. We're not going to do much to change the climate situation. So, Michael, I hear that industry has a huge footprint, but I think it's a reaction to consumerism. And if we start to ground roots, there are more consumers than there are industries. And if we change our behavior, it's going to change their reactions.
Okay. Isn't the problem that we don't pay the true cost of a product? If there are external consequences of a product, if a product causes pollution and the producer of that product doesn't pay those costs, then then it's not reflected in the price. And I think economic theory would say that taxation is the answer. You should tax a product so that we pay what something really costs to produce. I don't know whether you agree with that or not. Anyhow. So we've had got a couple of stories that have been in the press recently, which we thought we'd take a look at. And the first of those stories, more than half of consumers say they've been misled by brand sustainability claims. Ellen, I think you took a look at that article. What's all that about then?
So this is a really interesting article. It was done, it was based on research that was done with a very large group. And it talks a lot about greenwashing. And even when consumers want to go down the right path, unfortunately, sometimes they've been led astray, right? Because what the sustainability claims from the organization, the industry, the product, are not always substantiated, right? We're not always getting the truth. And in fact, there's a comment at the end of the article that puts us in a post-truth world. And that was a tough pill to swallow, but I think unfortunately true, ironically. I do see good news and bad news here. So the good news is the consumers are more aware. If they're feeling they're being misled, then they're actually looking for that information, and that is good news. And because of that, now greenwashing is becoming less easy to do because people are pointing it out. So those are good things that are happening. And the last thing that I thought was good here is it said, people are stopping their purchase of certain items. And that's good too, right? If we're talking about consumerism and the need to reduce what we buy, reduce waste. All of those I thought were good points, although stopping buying things was not necessarily portrayed as good in the article. The bad news was, to your point earlier, Michael, that unfortunately green products, real green products, sustainable products do tend to have a higher price. And I think that if we can start to reduce what we buy, we will reduce the amount of labor and some of the other things that happen to consistently be producing the products we're looking for. And potentially things may level out. So I found it really interesting. I also thought your survey was interesting, that although not the majority, but 43% of the people who took the survey said they do research the supply chain. So I think altogether, this means that a greater awareness is going to hopefully cause less greenwashing and the need for organizations to be more truthful about how they're producing their products.
May I step in just shortly? I spend most of my time in logistics. I am specialized in global supply chain efficiency logistics. And I can tell you that even the people in companies don't know what is the supply chain. So I do slightly, I am fascinating that 43% of people think that they know what is the supply chain. Because it's very, very difficult. It's difficult because before you start any investigation, you have to sign NDA. So even the supplier don't know where the goods came from. It's very complicated. So, and I do not agree that ethical or let's say more environmentally friendly products must be more expensive. That's a boost up from the market. If we take just the biofood, the basic condition, local, with no fertilizers or no chemical fertilizers, and fresh. Why should this be more expensive than to fly apples from the US? It's nonsense. It's just a marketing markup. The companies have heard ethical will be a higher price. They will be ready to pay. So let's put up the markup price. I work with a lot of retail chain stores and so on. The markup can be 300, 400%, on these goods. But it has nothing to do with the real price.
Yeah, I think what's been going on in Ukraine, I think people have become a lot more aware of their supply chain. I agree with you. A lot of people don't know what their supply chain is. I was reading up about rare earth elements recently, and until recently, a lot of companies didn't even know what rare earth elements were in their products, let alone they didn't know what their supply chain was. They didn't even know what the products were. I guess that's changed slightly because of what's been going on in Ukraine, and companies have been forced to consider their supply chain a little bit more carefully. And people are talking about it now, things like resilience of the supply chain and so on and so forth. But it's a long way to go, I guess.
Michael, I would agree that sustainable products don't need to be more expensive. That they simply are more expensive. I totally agree with that.
Okay, so there's a reality thing here. Okay, fine.
And maybe Isabel can add something, because she's right now sitting in the heart of international trade, so generally in China. So any comment on that, Isabel?
Well, I'll add that anything that's not transparent or not authentic is not going to be sustainable. And we're going to elaborate a little bit more on that on later conversation. and it eventually leads to distrust and rejection. And I'm very positive about it because of different rising forces in the power. So I'm excited for our continued discussion on this.
Okay, thanks for that, Isabella. So, and while I've got you, Isabella, there's another story. New research from Kantar points to I should have said, by the way, that previous article, more than half of consumers say they've been misled by brand sustainability claims. That was in the drum. And then there's an article, new research from Kantar points to a crisis of trust among consumers over greenwashing. And that was in, I don't know what publication that was in, on Mask, M-A-E-R-S-K, Mask. Isabella, so what's that about, this crisis of trust amongst consumers over greenwashing?
Can you repeat it again, Michael? I think I got some.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I'm so sorry. I've lost the plot. I've gone doolally. I read to you the wrong story. We've already covered new research in Kantar. The story is Generation Z buyers. The future is ethical consumption. Okay. I'm sorry, I missed that story. And that was in Mask publication. Generation Z buyers. The future is ethical consumption. So this is this idea that the Generation Z are more ethnically conscious. Isabella, can you explain a little bit more to us about this?
Yes. Here we are. So there's a lot of data and facts to support the statement. We can cross-check after. We don't have time to go over it. But basically, the key message here is that companies seek to secure their future should pay very close attention to this particular group of people and align with their values, because their influence is here already and it's growing. They demand for change, okay? The change from politicians, communities, and companies by supporting them with their purchasing power. And they're increasingly focusing on ethical consumption. And they have a strong preference for sustainable brands, and they're willing to pay more for sustainable products. And to them, sustainability is not just about environmental friendly products. It goes beyond that to logistics, social causes, and authentic engagement. And they want brands to take serious chance on important social issues. Also, don't try to fool them, because they can easily spot the contradiction between the company's messaging versus their actual practicing. And you also don't want to take the consequence of messing around with this, because they're also very quick in sharing information on companies that fell short on authenticity. And this group of people is called Generation Z, and they're also being called the woke generation. I kind of like the name in this article. They mentioned that. And roughly they're born from 1997 to 2012, and they're very known for their open-mindedness and acceptance.
Okay, thank you for that, Isabella. And then Michael, if you have anything to add, please jump in. Otherwise, I have some questions.
I just have one comment to the publisher. Maersk company is one of the largest shipping companies, container shipping companies in the world. They live from shipping a cargo from one place of the globe to the others. And they ship up to 55% of the shipping containers are being shipped empty, carrying just the air. So this is about the greenwashing and the terms. I do fully agree what Isabel says. It's really, especially the speed, how information is being exchanged. This is for this Z generation is really unbelievable. But there is important that this generation as well is generally, this generation has a very short term of concentrating on one topic. You know, they are switching from one to another. So it means more dedication to one topic. If there will be such a thing, it will improve strongly the impact.
Okay, all right. We've had a few questions. I thought I'd like to try and deal with them as they come in. And whilst I've got you all on the screen, we've had a question from Mina. I actually think change starts in education and the rag trade corporates. If you have anything to add, just butt in. Otherwise, I'll just read the questions.
Education, fully agree, but the education does not start with the school. And does not end with the school. So education is the whole life approach, and we have to learn every single day. But I do fully agree. Unfortunately, corporates do not. The core business of corporates is to make money. That's the answer.
Fair comment.
I think we can also learn from the past. If we turn the clock back, and I tell people this a lot, that I was raised by parents who were affected by the Depression. So sustainability in my house as a kid were leftovers and hand-me-downs. And that was sustainable, right? We didn't buy more food than we needed. We didn't, I didn't get a new wardrobe when my sister outgrew hers, it got handed down. So I think we're if we start to look back a little onto the way we used to live, and we could take lessons from that, and potentially start to live more, I would like to say more naturally than we do now.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. We've also had a comment from Dawn Rennick. She says the medical industry produces a significant amount of waste from single-use material.
It's true.
Yeah.
And again, as Ilan says, generally, if even the healthcare industry look back, they will see that they did not use it before because they sterilize a lot of things. And today, even steel scissors are being thrown away after one and single use. It's completely wrong. I just make several projects for the healthcare, and I can tell you that we can decrease the volume of wasting, including packaging. That's important, including packaging. So we can reduce by 80%, 80. It's a huge number. And this is just the start.
Okay, thank you. All right. And Christopher's back again. Christopher, who asked a question earlier, he said, technology can change for good. However, let's not lose sight of the fact that much of it poor, is a major contributor in the fight against negative environmental impact. Tech is also an issue with negative social change. So I think this is the Jekyll and Hyde aspect of technology. It does a lot of good, but it does a lot of bad. Technology is a solution, probably does provide a solution to climate change, actually, but it's also it comes with all kinds of problems, including the stuff you were talking about earlier, Isabella, when you're talking about your book. So if you have any comments, please butt in. Otherwise, I'll push on with the next comment.
It does come down to data. I mean, technology is only as good as the data it has. And to Christopher's point, a lot of that, he says a lot of it is poor. My experience is a lot of it is missing or skipped over. Technology, specifically the ones that we implement, help our clients calculate their carbon footprint, their emissions, get to their baseline, and hopefully help them make decisions that improve, their impact on the planet. However, if the data is incomplete or they cherry pick, well, I want to just report A, B, but not C, then it could look like a good report, but missing pieces of information. So the technology has its own emissions and footprint and mining and everything that goes with it. But truly, it comes down to the data and how the data is being used. And that's where you start to get the greenwashing as well. Of course, none of my clients do that.
If I can add one information to the previous question. This here, it's a single-use package from a hospital. You see the size. It's really single use. This insulation box will be used just one and single time. So brought it just from a hospital a few weeks ago. But coming back to the technology, if we use it as a tool, it will be right. If it starts to use us as tools, that's a bad thing. And I'm saying that from a place which is 75 kilometers away from a location where the word robot was introduced in 1921 by Karel Čapek in a work called RUR.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Miranda says it has to be a partnership between consumers and producers to have the greatest impact. So it's down to business, it's down to consumers. We've got to work together. Christopher's back. I disagree, Michael. I think he's disagreeing with you, Michael. I don't think he's disagreeing with me. I think he's disagreeing. It's difficult. We've got two Michaels. We live in a world of unnecessary greed. Why do we need 50 dresses or 30 pairs of shoes? Greed and a want society is the driving force behind our decline as a species. That's strong.
I would like to answer to Christopher. I'm asking all the time, or I am suggesting we should utilize what we have, not look for what we can get.
Okay. Utilize what we have, not what we can get. Well, yeah, I think things have gone a little bit mad recently. We are consuming a crazy amount, and I don't think there's any evidence that there's a correlation between consumption and happiness. I think that's for sure.
There is one thing which is very important, and it's connected to global economy generally. If you are rating, for example, a car maker, and you make an economy rating, the people ask, how many cars have you produced? But they did not ask how many cars have users at the end. So we are evaluating ourselves on the volumes of produced, but the volume of really used and consumed is much more lower because of the technology and everything. So this discrepancy make the issue, because we consume more and more, and some products, some factories are being 80% of new products are being produced as waste already because they know it will not be sold. In a fashion, you mentioned fashion, Michael, the standard order for 10 pieces of t-shirts. At the moment when you order, you know only 3 will be sold for a full price, 2 will be sold with a reduced price, and 5 will be wasted. This is already known at the beginning. I work with a big group related to that. Okay. Why? So that's
all right.
Stupid.
I received Fort Knox in the post the other day. Fort Knox arrived in my post. Actually, it wasn't Fort Knox. It was the packaging for my new iPhone. I got a new iPhone, hooray! And honestly, getting into the box, it might as well have been Fort Knox. It was really difficult getting in. Anyway, Isabella, any thoughts so far about what we've been talking about?
I mean, it's fun. I like how Michael is challenging everything. Sorry, we know each other. So I love his style. And I agree with the packaging and the reusable thing in the medical field. And I didn't even mention, you should see the packaging delivery service in China for food delivery. Huge. I don't have anything here to show like Michael, but yeah, I'll just stop here.
Okay. All right. Well, I would be very interested to see this packaging in China. That'd be a very interesting thing. Christopher again comments, good point, supply chain education and coaching the need for more sustainable thinking. I don't think we need to respond to that necessarily, but that's what Christopher said. And finally, Ray Edgar said, from an ESG perspective, is this not all about legislation to ensure consumers can compare green costs on items, e.g., where do these items come from?
Good luck. I mean, there are regulations out there across the globe. Certainly the US is lagging some of the other countries in that kind of legislation. There are some good nonprofit organizations that have developed over the last decade that have standards, the CDP, the GRI, things like that. But right now, in many places, it's voluntary. So I think one of the comments earlier was that it has to be producers and consumers together. And I think the more consumers have a voice and actually speak with their wallets, the more we'll be able to move in that direction where honesty and transparency is the norm and not something we have to seek out.
Okay. I mean, I think
Ellen,
there isn't. Go on. Sorry.
Sorry, Michael. Ellen, you hit the point with the term transparency. You know, as I mentioned before, at the moment, before you start any business, you sign NDA, non-disclosure agreement. You cannot say anything. So, and this make it completely non-transparent. If we open and make it transparent, which is Industry 5.0 is based with 3 principles: transparency, profit sharing, and efficiency. And profit sharing should be with the customer, of course. So there is no problem. We have the technology. Isabel know it, you know it. We have a lot of tools which we can use for communication between the consumer and the end and the producer, and exchange between consumers and exchange between producers, but this is not done. We are stuck in a silos, and this is the issue.
Okay, I'm very conscious that we're having a great discussion, but time is disappearing from us. Ellen, I just wanted you to give us a little bit of a summary. It was your suggestion in the first place to me that we talked about ethical consumerism. What are your thoughts then? Can you sort of just give us a sort of a rundown of the world according to Ellen on this topic?
Sure, I'll put that target on my head. So ethical consumerism, I see it in three different avenues. One, buying only what you need, and we've talked about that, right? You don't need 30 dresses or 30 pairs of shoes, right? Buy what you need, use it as long as you can, and don't go above and beyond. So we're all consumers. I consume. I buy food. I consume food, right? There are things I need based on the life that humans have built. Me in New York City, potentially different than everyone else in different locations. But that doesn't mean I have to overindulge, right? Just because I want something, like that new pair of earrings that keeps popping up on my Facebook feed, it doesn't mean I'm going to buy it because I don't need it, although I want it. So there's a consciousness around buying what you actually need to consume. Then there's a consideration about the materials. What are you buying? So the packaging we've talked about, that's one thing. And the materials of the product that you're buying. Is it reusable? I donate a lot of my clothes. It's reusable. Can I use it in a different way after it's completed its purpose? Can I be creative? Can I, upcycle it? Is it biodegradable? I've switched to biodegradable garbage bags instead of plastic, right? I didn't research the company that produces them, and I'll be honest about that. But moving in those directions, being a consumer of more products that are touted as green, and then of course doing the research. And then, is it recyclable? And it's better than those things that are not recyclable, but of course there are questions around the validity of actually recycling and the recycling industry. And then finally, how was it made? What human rights go around there? We've talked about fashion, and there's a lot of conversation around fashion. And to Michael's point, they're making more than they need to make. So, the labor is working harder than it needs to work in that scenario. But in the end, you want to, there are certifications around organic, fair trade. That's one thing to look at. Continue to research. And we really all have to keep asking these questions. The conversation needs to continue. And to the article that you mentioned earlier with Gen Z, they're taking up this as a true conversation throughout that generation. So all the other generations, I am not Gen Z, but I learned that from the past. If we continue the conversation, then it hopefully will lead to the right solutions, which is reduced consumerism, which is potentially the legislations, which is an understanding that sustainability doesn't have to be more expensive. And I think, so ethical consumerism is your own morals and ethics and how the product was produced, and just continuing to do the research so that those products that are produced ethically are the ones that most people are selecting.
Okay, thanks for that, Ellen. Now, look, I'm very conscious that the time is disappearing from us. We've still got a lot to cover. I'm going to be chatting to Isabel. Ellen's going to be talking to Michael, and we've got 3 new questions who just come in. So what I think we're going to have to do, we're going to have to run over slightly. We'll come back to those questions at the end, I think. Isabella, maybe time for us to have a quick chat. Can you tell me, why ethical consumerism, and what does ethical consumerism mean to you?
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Michael. I think we've talked quite a bit to understand what is ethical consumerism. Ellen mentioned that very well. And I recall, I think it's Miranda mentioned that it's both from consumers and providers. So I'll bring that again. It's 2 sides of the coin, consumer and provider, to both come together, be awake to a mindfulness of this impact, a consequence of each transaction, realize that it's going beyond just the money and the product. And to me, this whole thing is more like a value reflection of our system and our personal value. And why to reflect back to my old point before we're making a purchase. Is it because we need it, or just because it makes us look good, or because make other people think we're good? And we often overlook the cheap labor issue, massive waste, and everything we just talked about earlier. So in short, capitalism develops the values and the behaviors of our society, and consumption is at its core. And how do we consume reflects our value system, and our value system in return shapes who we are and the direction of our humanity and our very existence. So that's why it matters.
Okay, thank you for that, Isabella. Now, also this Generation Z thing. Are Generation Z really different from previous generations? And sort of what role do their values play in consumer choices, do you think?
Yeah, we go through that the previous article, and there's a lot of data there to show how influential Generation Z is affecting our marketplace. There's a number saying that they're influencing about $600 billion in family spending, not because they're spending, also they advise their friends, their family, their parents. And they're comfortable with 2 things. Number 1 is technology. They're super tech savvy and more so mobile minded, digital native. They like smartphones, mobile devices. And number 2 is they like to taking risk, whether it means to get a new job or try a new app or start a new business. And they're not just fearless, but they're passionate about social justice, environmental issues, human rights, and they're willing to take real actions to make those differences. So by saying that, as a business provider, as a service provider, we need to be aware they're also very picky when it comes to user experience. And all of these nurtured a consumption culture revolves around open source community, community driven, and also shared economy. Things like Airbnb, Uber, those type of startup business pave the way for a gifted economy that really resonates with Gen Z's values.
Okay, thanks for that, Isabel. I'm going to say something a little controversial here. All of my life, when I was a kid, my parents, my grandparents, they said, I don't know what the world's coming to, these young people today. They're with their long hair and their awful taste in music and their attitudes towards sex before marriage or whatever. I think every generation, the older generation looks at them at horror at what these young kids are like. And I'm a little bit cynical when people talk about Generation Z being the woke generation. For me, that's no different from what my parents and grandparents were saying about my generation when I was a kid. They didn't call us woke. Word exist in those days, but the criticisms were very, very similar. So I'm a little cynical about all of that. But anyhow, Isabella, I'm going to have to ask you to answer this question super quick. What practical steps can companies take to build and maintain the trust of Generation Z, do you think? 30 seconds? Can you do that one in 30 seconds?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I say, what? I don't know if you can answer really quick. Go on.
I think my AirPod just died, so I switched to this wired ones. Yeah, I'm sorry. You had a very interesting, controversial point at the end. I know I missed it, but what was the question, or is anything I can?
Well, my question
respond?
was, if you can answer super quick, what practical steps can companies take to build and maintain the trust of Generation Z consumers who prioritize ethical consumption? So I'm asking you to tell something that to take an hour to tell in about 30 seconds. So over to you.
Oh, all right. Okay, it's past 30 seconds already. Yeah, I'll do it quickly. Acknowledging them, not just bring them along or just take them on the way. Truly cooperate and to support them, make them feel like their voice being heard. And this is easy said and done, I know, but this is really critical for younger generations. And also do what you say and say what you do. Like I mentioned earlier, just don't try to fool them. They're very savvy and smart in finding out the truth. And once they find out, they will not buy you again forever. Maybe I shouldn't say forever, but it's going to be really to the point backfire with a very serious distrust.
Okay, thank you for that, Isabella. And now Michael and Ellen are going to be in conversation for a few minutes. I'm afraid, Michael and Ellen, I'm going to have to ask you to make this quite quick. If you can make this as quick as possible. We've got lots of questions, so when you finish talking, we'll all come back and have a look at some of the questions we've had from the audience. But Michael and Alan, over to you. And if you could try and talk about five minutes or so, 5 or 6 minutes, that'd be great.
Not a problem.
So, did he say 5 to 6 hours, or I probably listen wrong?
Thanks, Michael. So, Michael, you and I spoke earlier this week to prepare for today, and I think with 5 minutes given to us now, with my definition of ethical consumerism and buying what you need, I think that plays right into a lot of what you talk about as far as waste. So how can ethical consumerism actually affect waste management, waste reduction, and waste prevention?
Generally, it is, I would like to say first that we shouldn't feel ourselves as consumers. We should feel ourselves as humans. So because we will not be reduced to someone who will buy or not buy. That's important. And then, we just follow our instincts in some way. You say back to nature, and that's exactly the way. As you said, we don't need 50 T-shirts. Why should we? Let's have enough and be fine with it. And trust me, it works. I do it for 10 years and it really works. That's the advice. So
let's talk about a couple myths. A lot of people talk about recycling. Now, recycling is better than getting into a landfill, but we know that unfortunately the things that are recyclable also do wind up in landfill. So how can we reduce waste?
Generally, it is important to understand that waste prevention is not recycling. Waste prevention is really not to throw the items in a garbage. So if I have a single-use plastic bottle and I finish it, why not to refill it again with something? Because this will be, I will cut immediately with this step the carbon footprint of the of the bottle by 50%. And if I refill it 10 times, I will be at 10%. So it is important to understand that recycling, it's a great idea in very wrong hands. The hands of waste industry, which is the third most profitable industry in the world, turn it into their profit. But as you said, many things which we put in a recycling bin ends up on a landfill. And the rest is being sold, not processed. My government says that we are recycling from 92%. The reality is 12. There is 80% difference. Because the government name recycling sorting, but sorting is not recycling. Sorting is first step in a long process called recycling. But sorting is not recycling. That's important to understand. So it's all the time better to prevent the waste happen. And I just show you something which I did not before. I don't know whether you can see. This is a generally earring. And you know what is made from? Coffee capsules. This small coffee, it's made from that. So let's prevent the waste happen.
So we've been talking about consumerism and we've been talking about industry and profits. And now you're telling us that waste is one of the most profitable industries.
Yes.
So as humans and consumers, I think, unfortunately, we're both, right? How do we tackle that?
It is important to understand. So explaining who are the two, because the waste industry is the third most profitable industry in the world. The most profitable is war industry, weapons, killing, and everything. The second is crude oil. The third is waste. Crude oil is in very big troubles. So if the crude oil will fall away, there will be war and waste. One generate the other. And our planet will be a landfill. So how to avoid it? It's really switching from wasteful, that we must generate waste, into we can prevent waste to happen. And the difference is very simple. You know, waste is something which you put in a place dedicated for waste storage. This is a line in the legislation, which means if you do not put it there, it's not waste. And this is exactly the example with the bottle. This is the example with many things. These are old shoelaces turned into a bracelet. You know, many things can be done. We just have to talk together, share the information, and share the results. Because with that, we will be able to stand in front or face the government's legislation, industries, and narrow, so have waste prevented.
I love that you said share the results, because we are talking about keeping the conversation going, and we are joined by the rest of the team here to keep the conversation going. It's mindset, it's behavior, and it's the conversation around the results. I think that was
exactly,
and that's certainly one of the key things I'll take away from this conversation.
And I just show one more thing. This is a nice fashion accessory. You see the size, it's not small comparing to my head. It's made from the used potato chips bags. And the methodology, and coming back to you, Ellen, the methodology is origami 400 years old.
I used to do that with gum wrappers.
Just with the new material, which the Japanese did not have 400 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, I certainly think that we want to avoid the planet becoming a landfill site. And I also think this is quite interesting because, you know, there's an E in ESG and people think of climate change. But actually, there's a little bit, that's not the only environmental consideration. And waste is and it links to climate change. Of course, climate change, of course it does. But I think it's something that stands up in its own. And I know that climate change is controversial in the United States, as I don't need to tell you, Alan. But I don't think waste is it. I think that most people agree that we don't want the planet to become a landfill site. I think that the far right in the United States would agree with that, wouldn't they? I think.
I hope so.
They do. I can tell you because I have people all around the world in 117 countries. But what is interesting, Michael, do you know what was the first thing which I concentrated 10 years ago on waste prevention? It was not when I spoke about a landfill, I did not look below my feet. I look up in the sky because on the orbit, there is 170 million pieces of space debris.
Indeed, there is.
So there is a landfill.
We're running very, very short of time. We've gone well over, and I've got lots of questions. So can I quickly run through the questions? But can I ask you to answer them super quick? We've got a question from Phil. And Phil said, I agree with Ellen's point about learning from the past. The challenge with that is from a communications perspective that this often gets attacked as the green movement wanting eco-austerity. I think there's a lot of work to counter this, not least in a wider narrative about consumerism and well-being. So it's a wider discussion, not just about energy carbon, which I think is kind of backs up what I said just now about this being more than just climate change. I think what I'll do is I'll run through all the questions and then I will go back to you and give you all a minute to sum up. Anita said, in the food industry, the new meal kit service, even though they are promising reducing food wastage, but the amount of packaging involved in the process puts the industry at disadvantage. My question is, why is this food innovation being entertained in the industry? And has there been any correction or regulation standards being introduced? I don't know if any of you got any. We seem to have lost Isabella. I think she's got problems with her connectivity. I don't know if either of you two have got any thoughts about. Oh, Anna's back. Hello, Isabella. Good to see you again.
Hi. Yes.
I don't know if you've got any comments on that. And then Dawn says, sorry.
The food industry, I think, is trying to transition from meat to plant. And I agree. I mean, I've done some of that. I will admit I haven't done 100%, but there is a lot of packaging, and so you do have this two sides of the coin where companies are trying to take a step in the right direction, but it's not necessarily holistic. Because we're going to do plant-based, but we're going to use a lot of plastic in the packaging. There's a lot more work to be done across the board.
Okay, I have a controversial view about the move from meat to plant. I think the future of meat is cultured meat, but that's my controversial view.
If I can add just one sentence to the food industry, very few people know that in fact 75% of all food and crops is being wasted before it reached the second stage of production. 75, so 3/4 of all what we plant and produce is being wasted before it reached the consumer.
Okay. Dawn, I like this question. What do you think about mandating QR codes on all products that inform consumers about the product's total cost and supply chain? You're not going to answer that question in 30 seconds, but I'm going to ask you to anyway. Mandating QR codes, what do you think?
My opinion, because the content of the QR codes will be filled with the producer, it will not change anything because the producer will put there what he or she wants, not what must be there. So it must be much more than just a QR code.
Okay. Okay. Joanna asks, actually, I've noticed that many Generation Z children are more frugal than their parents. They don't care about owning apartments or automobiles. They'd rather rent them because they'd have more freedom to change their properties. Their parents, relatives, and siblings who are older than them, on the other hand, consider this abnormal. They believe they are working hard to improve their lives. Varied generations have varied perspectives on what constitutes a better life. So that's interesting. I think Joanna is talking about this idea of ownership, about how Generation Z, maybe they don't consider ownership quite so important. I do happen to believe that we're probably 5 to 10 years away from the whole ownership model changing in the auto industry. I think that as autonomous cars occur, we're going to start seeing automobiles as a service. But that's my own view about that one. Christopher says biodegradable plastic is a reality, but is it profitable? Can you give me a yes or no answer to that question?
I cannot give you yes and no, but I will say that no matter which material the packaging is produced from, if it will be single use, it's wrong. Because it's not about the material, it's about the single use. And I have tested some of this new plastic. Trust me, there are hidden issues behind.
Okay.
And I can show you, but we do not have time.
This is always the case.
It's single use.
Everywhere, isn't it? Okay. Ellen, Isabella, any thoughts about biodegradable plastic?
I mean, if something's being produced that's truly biodegradable, and I understand the single use, like the my dishwashing soap, right? It comes in a little plastic thing and it dissolves and is biodegradable. I don't know the background on how that's produced. However, if it's done ethically and something's biodegradable, I would say that it's the right way to go. Profitability, I would think if it's being sold anywhere, there's got to be someone making a profit.
Okay. So I had a great way of making money when I was a kid. You could take bottles back to the point where they were where they were bought, and they would give you money for them. It was only a tiny amount of money, but I was a kid. Tiny amount of money was good. But I believe this idea is sort of coming back into fashion now. And Dawn asked, what do you think about companies giving cents back on the dollar for bringing bottles and packaging back to them for repurposing? We've got one more question after this, and then we're going to have to pack up. So any thoughts on that one?
Repurposing right, return schemes right, not only for bottles. The only wrong thing is that we concentrate on bottles only. That's completely wrong. There are so many types of packaging which can be returned. You have seen the medical one. Big size, it can be returned.
Okay. John asks the question, how do we get this message into business schools to supply chain classes? How do we get this message across into the business school? Look, rather than answering that question, by all means answering that question, I'm going to ask you all to give me a 30-second sum up, your thoughts. And if you want to answer that question in your sum up, please do. Michael, 30-second sum up. What do you think?
Okay, so I think that it is important to understand that we are not consumers. We are humans and we have to act as humans. So do not reduce ourselves as consumer. How to get it to the schools? Invite me for a webinar. 90 minutes and I will change all the students and teachers. I did it on 500 universities and I will do it on your schools as well.
Okay, nice sales pitch, Michael. What about you, Ellen?
I think that we need to keep the conversation going, and I do think the supply chain is where we need to start to truly uncover the truth. And maybe these NDAs need to either go away or have the ability to talk about what's important to the humans as we consume.
Okay, and Isabella, you're going to close the ESG show today.
Oh, okay. I gotta mark this. So for each one of us, I want us to think other ways to fulfill our emptiness within other than consumption. And for our staff members at companies, at decision makers, I suggest that please think about your next generation when you make every decisions. Your daughter, your dear cousin, your granddaughter, what action can you take to benefit them while you still have the power to do so? Now, when you have the power to do so, not after you're retired, I think I'm going to do something good for my grandchildren. And that's my closing.
Okay, Isabella, Ellen, Michael, thank you all very, very much. I hope we'll have you back on the ESG show next year sometime. And in fact, we have provisionally spoken to Michael about appearing on the show to talk about waste in the new year. But thank you very, very much. And thank you all for watching. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.